Mr. President, members of the legislature, when it comes to gambling, I can probably be classed as a prude. Senator Erdman brought to my attention something that I hadn't noted with reference to this bill because it's being done by way of amendment, if I understand correctly. What I did note was something that Senator Shimmick had commented on in terms of giving law enforcement authority for the specific purpose of dealing with these machines, and I'm going to talk about that a bit after I ask Senator Erdman a question or two.
Senator Erdman, would you yield to a question?
I would, Mr. President.
Senator Erdman, the provision which allows an increase in the number of times that these lottery, or tell me what the amendment does that you were just commenting on.
Section 16 of AM 565 is the provision of LB 301 that specifically deals with giving the state lottery more flexibility in making the state lottery more lucrative to try to attract more players and therefore increase the number of people who actually play the state lottery under the guise of trying to promote some of these worthwhile programs.
And that is in the amendment that's pending right now?
That is Section 16. Senator Chambers, I think what you may have heard is the bingo provision. That is in a different section of the amendment and was a different bill, and it might actually even be in LB 638.
Okay, but there's an amendment before us right now. What number is that? Is that Amendment 565?
It is, Senator Chambers.
And that's the one which contains the part that you objected to?
I believe it contains three separate provisions that are germane to the lottery, but the one that I opposed in committee was LB 301, and that is generally contained in Section 16 of the amendment.
And that was a separate bill?
It was. It was LB 301.
I don't like the expansion of gambling either, and especially the lottery. Thank you, Senator Erdman. Sure. I think that's one of the biggest shams that this state ever got into. I think it is demoralizing. I would say immoral if I was one to argue on the basis of morality. I do not think it is sound state policy to encourage people to go after a will-o'-the-wisp. You know that the chances of winning the lottery are minuscule. There have to be a lot of suckers who lose in order for a few suckers to win. But the suckers who win usually have lost so much that they're not going to recoup what they had lost. And I think it is terrible for the state to take action to encourage more citizens to engage in this losing activity. If these various, I guess you would say, charitable purposes and worthwhile societal purposes are indeed worthy, they should not be funded by gambling. Senator McDonald has come to us with offerings to increase the amount of money available for problem gamblers. And I've supported those provisions. Then why are you going to increase the gambling? It's a lure, and the state is the house. The house never loses when it comes to gambling. If this amendment is adopted, then I definitely am going to oppose LB 638, if that's the number of the bill. Oh, Senator McDonald collegially informed me that is the number of the bill. I'd like to ask Senator Jansen a question.
One minute. Senator Jansen, would you yield to a question?
Yes.
Senator Jansen, are you a member of this committee still?
Yes.
Who offered LB 301?
I did.
Now, does it increase, is it designed to increase the number of people who play the lottery?
I doubt very much whether it will increase it any more than it has increased.
Is it designed to increase or decrease the number?
It is designed to keep it at its status quo or possibly increase the sales.
But if it's just to you acknowledge, though, it's not just to maintain status quo. Its intent is to increase the number of people who play the lottery. That can get a straightforward answer.
That is what happened when we put it in 5 years ago. It did increase the sales then.
Thank you, and I'm going to put my light on because I think my time is out here. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Senator Jansen was trying, in the short space of time that existed, to bring me up to speed on what his Bill 301 actually did. So I'm going to give him some of my time if he will yield to explain.
Senator Jansen.
Yes, I'll yield to the question, Jim.
All right. Now, Senator Jansen, precisely what does LB 301 do?
LB 301 extends the way the lottery is distributed for another 5 years. When we first put it in place 5 years ago, the beneficiaries were losing some money because the play was on the lottery was kind of stagnant due to the gambling from other states. And we raised the payouts on the tickets, so to generate more play, which happened, and the beneficiaries were receiving more revenue from the play of the games that were brought on by the people. I don't know how many years ago it was when they voted the lottery in. So that is what happened, Senator Chambers, and we are asking that is extended for another 5-year period.
Senator Jansen, would you accept 1 year? Let me ask this. Well, if your proposal jeopardized LB 638, do you think you have enough juice to get your proposal adopted and salvage 638? Well, if not, then I think you ought to consider what is being done.
Extended 1 more year, you say?
Yeah, what about that?
Well, you know, I think that that would be something, but that would be up to the chairman of the General Affairs Committee to also acknowledge approval of.
Well, it's your bill that's being added.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Well, why don't we take your bill out of this amendment, then deal with your bill when it comes up? And if we're going to get bills that on their own may be troublesome, then I'm going to start looking far more closely at this Christmas tree. Because these kind of bills should not slide through because the bill carrying it may have support.
All right. Yeah. Let me add a little bit more to this, if I could use. I'll push my light on. So, if we need more time, Senator, if in 2003, the legislature amended the state statute 9812, guaranteed that the total funds transferred from the state lottery trust fund to various receiving funds would not be less than the amount transferred to those funds in fiscal year 2002 and 2003 through January 1st of 2008. Well, next year is 2008. Since 2003, there's been both an increase in the sales and an increase of the total amounts that have been transferred to the various funds. This bill would extend the date for this change to January 1st, or from January 1st of 2008 to July 1st of 2013.
But Senator Jansen, a deal is a deal. And the deal was that it would last until January of 2008.
Right.
Correct?
That's
right. And so now this is a stratagem of those who support gambling as a means to do what they consider good work.
1 minute.
For 5 more years. And they'll continue to do that, won't they? When will it stop?
I think they will. Yes, they will. That was evident from the past few years. The trust funds that this money was going to were seeing more funds being put back into the environmental trust and the other beneficiaries. So that's where it's at. I mean, if people don't think that these beneficiaries should have that, why, that's fine. It's just protecting
the question
those entities.
The question is whether or not this deal should be broken and a new one put in place to extend it 5 more years, which then makes it a total of 10 years. And that was not what was contemplated at the time that original move was made. And the people who you call the recipients...
Time.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Jansen's light is on next if you want to continue.
All right, Senator Chambers, we can continue our discussion here. But what was happening was the play was going down or it was stagnant, let's put it that way, or possibly a little lower due to the conditions throughout from the other states. But when we increased that payout, there was an acceleration in the sales. And that is what we were looking for, so that the funds that were going to these entities would not be lessened anymore.
All you have done,
and it did work.
But Senator Jansen, what this is designed to do is sweeten the bait that is thrown out to catch the suckers. Isn't that true? By saying you have a chance while you're losing to win more if you happen to win. It does not improve the chances of winning, does it? Let me ask it a different way.
No, it doesn't.
The more lottery tickets that are sold, the lesser becomes the chance of each person with one of those lottery tickets to win. Isn't that true?
I think there is a percentage, and I don't know what it is.
I'm not asking for the percentage. Let me give it in numbers if I can. If 100 people buy these lottery tickets, each one buys one, you have 1 in 100 chances of winning. If 1,000 people buy the tickets, you have 1 in 1,000 chances. So the more people you encourage to play the lottery, the lesser chance a person has of winning. Isn't that true?
Well, I suppose that could be argued both ways, Senator. The more you play it, I believe that your chances of winning are going up.
Senator Jansen, because it's your time, I have to continue to engage you. The purpose of all of this is to increase the number of people who pay the lottery, to get more money to give to these various entities that receive money from the lottery fund.
Exactly.
Isn't that true?
Exactly.
And it is your view and the view of others that these entities that receive the money are doing good work for society.
That's
Is
true.
that what you agree
That's
with?
Correct.
But the means of doing this good work is tainted by encouraging people, more people, to gamble.
Yes, you could look at it that way.
Have you been here during the last few years and paid attention when my seatmate, Senator McDonald, brought legislation to increase the amount of money available to help problem gamblers because gambling created their problem? Have you been here for that purpose?
Yes, I've seen that, and this would also increase the amount going to that fund.
Senator Jansen, do you consider yourself the Lord?
A Lord?
The Lord, L-O-R-D.
Heaven help us all if I do.
You would be in charge of heaven if you were, so you could help us all. But do you consider yourself the Lord?
No.
Well, it is the Lord who giveth and the Lord taketh. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Now, why on the one hand are you going to give money to help problem gamblers, then through state action create more opportunities to create more problem gamblers and intensify the problems of those gamblers who already have a problem? What kind of sense does that make?
Well, Senator, I think that I sell these tickets in my business, and I have not seen an increase in the number of people that play them. What I have seen is the increased purchase of those that do play them.
So if they've got a problem, their problem is increased because they now spend more money to support that terrible habit.
Apparently that's what's happened. The sales have risen.
So why should we do that?
Well,
then here's what we ought to do. Then we ought to cut out all money for these problem gamblers. Then the hypocrisy is done away with. Are you in favor of cutting out all money for problem gamblers?
No, because that was in the constitutional amendment that brought this on.
Any money that we have put there by way of statute, we can do something about eliminating. Would you agree with that?
We can't eliminate the percentage of the money that's coming from them.
Any amount that we would add by statute can be removed by statute, can't it?
Absolutely, you know that.
Do you see something inconsistent about the state encouraging people to gamble then put money into a fund to help problem gamblers. Is there an inconsistency there?
Well, you can look at it that way, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Jansen.
Have a word with Senator Chambers.
Senator Chambers, would you yield to a question from Senator McDonald?
Yes, I shall.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. I heard you ask Senator Jansen if he would agree to the amendment, which was the amendment that's to the committee bill, but to change the 2013 to just 1 year, 2009. Would you be acceptable to that, to Senator Chambers?
Caught in my own trap. Yes, Senator McDonald, I will accept that.
And if that passes on the floor, will you support the bill?
Senator McDonald, I don't support gambling bills, but I will not fight against it hard. There will be some questions I will raise, but I will not go through extraordinary efforts to kill the bill. I can't vote for it, but I will not go against the bill in the way I am against this amendment unless I discover something that is similar, but I would discuss it and maybe we could reach an accord on those problems if I happen to see any. But right now, this is the big one. So if you get this one out of the way for me, then you've removed a great amount of problem I have with the bill.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. I think we have just put in an amendment to strike the 2013 and do 2009, and I think that amendment probably is being handled as we speak.
You're recognized to speak to AM 38.
Mr. President, members of the legislature, had I been just dealing with Senator Jansen, he would have just dug his heels in and said no, and then I could have removed his amendment altogether. But here is old, wily, clever, and when I say old, no reference to age, Senator McDonald, who listened to what I said and decided to trap me in my words. But I'm not being trapped completely because, as Senator Jansen pointed out, I will have another year to try to get rid of this entire thing, which probably is not going to happen. But I'm going to fight against it because I do not think the state should be encouraging gambling. I'd like to ask Senator Jansen a question.
Senator Jansen, would you yield to a question?
Yes.
Senator Jansen, this is a bill that the grocers would support. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And they support it because they get a cut from whatever is sold. Isn't that true?
Yeah, very minimal, but they do get a cut, yeah.
If they were not getting a cut, they would not be that interested in supporting this bill, would they?
Probably not.
Are you a grocer?
Unfortunately, I still am a grocer, yes. Unless you would like to buy my store.
You are a grocer.
Yes.
And you support this bill.
Yes.
You introduced this bill.
Yes.
You will profit if this bill is enacted into law.
It all depends upon how many we sell.
If you sell 1 ticket, will you get a cut?
Yes.
If you sell 1,000 tickets, will you get a cut?
Yes.
There's a certain percentage cut that you get no matter how many or how few tickets you sell, correct?
That's right. It's the same.
Okay. Is that percentage about 5%?
Oh, no.
What is the percentage?
I think it's 1.
But you're not sure?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure of that.
Could it be 5%?
I doubt very much.
You doubt, but could it be?
It could be.
Okay. And you'll check that out for me by the time we get through, and it doesn't have to be today. Okay, you'll get that for me?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll let you know.
That's all I'll ask of Senator Jansen. Members of the legislature, I am going to support adoption of this amendment. There still are matters in the bill that I will look at. But as stated previously, I'm not going to launch an all-out effort to stop this bill or harm it in any way. Remember, we're talking about additions to the bill at this point, not the bill itself. But when we get through adopting amendments, I am going to ask about that law enforcement provision which has been brought to us in the original underlying bill. But I'll wait until we reach that point before I engage in that discussion. I just want to alert anybody who might be interested to the fact that I'm going to address it. Thank you, Mr. President. President, members of the legislature, we're working on something so that I'm clear on what is being done, but my understanding when I read the green copy is that these people who are working with the Department of Revenue would have law enforcement authority when it comes to the gambling machines, and I want to explore that a bit and see just what it is they are being empowered to do. So I'm going to, are there any other lights on? Then I'm going to leave my mic open while I do this work so that the bill will not move without me completing what I need to do. Thank you, Mr. President.
We will continue your time.
Mr. President, members of the legislature, Senator McDonald is very willing to work our way through this, so I'm not going to delay us at this point. I will allow the bill to go ahead to select file, and by the time it comes up again, there will then be the opportunity to further discuss this if it's necessary. But at this point, I will turn my light off, and thank you. Thank you. Mr. President, members of the legislature, conceding much of what Senator Flood said to be true, I have much to say against this bill. This is one of the worst things that could be done. We had a representative of firefighters coming here saying they don't want to have to do this. And you all need to start reading these bills and not just take the superficial fluff that touches your emotions and you say this is a good thing and we ought to do it. So, to serve a purpose here, I'm going to read some of the language. If a firefighter or hospital staff member, and we don't know what a hospital staff member is, could it be anybody who works in the hospital? Could it be an orderly? Could it be a janitor? Could it be a person who is a security guard on the staff of the hospital? But anyway, if one of these persons takes temporary physical custody of a child pursuant to this section, the firefighter or hospital staff member shall perform any act necessary in accordance with generally accepted standards of professional practice to protect, preserve, and so forth. What does a firefighter know, without disparaging them, anything about accepted standards of professional practice? They must mean medical practice. A police officer, anybody in the hospital who can be called a staff member. There is nothing that was shown to us when this bill or Senator Paul's bill was being presented that showed that there was a justification to take an approach such as this. Contrary to what some people want to say, this is not a pro-life bill. This is a hodgepodge of maybe well-intentioned, but in my mind, very foolish provisions, and it ought not to be enacted into law. Who in here can tell me? In fact, I'll ask Senator Stootman because it's his bill. I'd like to ask Senator Stootman a question.
Senator Stootman would yield to a question from Senator Chambers.
Yes.
Senator Stootman, would you agree that if we are the lawmakers, we should understand what the law is that we're going to enact?
Yes.
Explain to me what are accepted standards of professional practice. What are those standards? Who established them? And would you answer?
In my opinion, Senator Chambers, the accepted practice would be the practice is in what would be the practice of a firefighter and a hospital staff member in this situation. And the hospital staff member, the reason we have that in there is because it is also in there stated that...
I don't want to go that far. My time will run out. This says accepted professional standards. Which profession are we talking about?
Senator Chambers, it would be the standards of the professions of the people that we're talking about, firefighters or hospital staff.
That's not clear from this language, in my opinion. Thanks, that's all I will ask you. Members of the legislature, read the language and ask yourself, If it means the standards of a firefighter, say so. Well, what are the standards that a volunteer firefighter would put into play when you have an infant 30 days or younger, 30 days old or younger? What is a firefighter taught in terms of how to deal with an infant that age? Nothing. But because this is such a highly charged emotional bill, I'm going to do everything I can to stop it. I'm going to save the legislature from itself on this.
1 minute.
Sounds good, but when you look at how it actually works, it's not. Look at the committee statement and see the people who came in opposition. Why in the world would the representative of Nebraska volunteer firefighters be against this if it's such a life-saving great thing? Because he pointed out that in some of these fire stations, there might not even be anybody present at the time an infant is dropped off there. And if so, they might have a call and have to respond to an emergency. So what are they to do? Not respond to the emergency, which is why they're there, in order to take care of this infant? Or respond to the emergency and leave the infant there. You are creating dilemmas for people who should not even have to confront something like this. This is not a duty that should be imposed on firefighters or anybody else. I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but the senators who vote for this, let their addresses be put out there in their church addresses and say drop the infants there.
Senator Chambers, you're recognized to open on the bracket motion.
First, I would ask that it be done by unanimous consent.
Members, the motion before you is to bracket LB 157 until April 18, 2007. Are there any objections? Senator Ashford, for what purpose do you rise?
Well, I would object to the April 18th bracket motion.
Objection is noted. Senator Chambers, you're recognized to open on the bracket motion.
Yes, I now move. Members of the legislature, Mr. President, members of the legislature, I'm glad Senator Fulton is reading the bill. The Judiciary Committee was in such a hurry to bring this bill out that they brought a sloppily, poorly drafted piece of legislation that relates to an emotional response to what I think everybody would agree is a serious problem. They cannot explain what's in this bill. Senator Stootman said he thinks that the term accepted standards of professional practice, he thinks that applies to the standards of a firefighter. Well, the firefighter's representative came and opposed it. If you all think that opposing this bill makes you an evil person, why do you think the Nebraska Medical Association opposed this bill? Why do you think the Nebraska Hospital Association opposed this bill? It may have been Senator Pauls who said he didn't see many people standing up in opposition. Do the people who are represented by the Nebraska Hospital Association not understand what is being discussed here? Do not the doctors understand? You think they want babies thrown into ditches and dumpsters and all of these horrendous, over-the-top descriptions that are being given to us? Senator Flood witnessed one tragic incident. One bad incident makes bad law. When you're going to change the statute and do it so hastily that, as Senator Fulton pointed out, there's a reference to another statute, which Senator Lathrop probably looked at, or he should have because he's a lawyer and he supported this. When there's a cross-reference, you look to see what is being referred to. So if the statute, which has been cross-referenced, does not apply to what this bill is dealing with, that is some sloppy drafting and some sloppy work by the committee. Just because I'm on the committee doesn't mean I'm going to approve of everything that that committee does. There's an emotional tide moving through the legislature this morning, and I'd venture to say, where's Senator Whiteman? Is he still here? Senator Whiteman has moved on. I'd like to ask Senator Pauls a question. Oh, Senator Whiteman. Senator Whiteman. I would like to ask Senator Whiteman a question if he would yield.
Senator Whiteman, would you yield to a question from Senator Chambers?
Senator Whiteman, you said you support this bill, correct?
That's correct.
Have you read the entire bill?
Yes, I have.
Did you read the section that is cross-referred to that Senator Fulton made reference to? Did you read see what that said?
I was out at the time that he, during part of his testimony, so.
Well, I'm going to ask you, did you read that section which is cross-referred to in this bill? Or did you only read what is in the green copy?
I read the green copy and I read the amendment.
Okay, now let me ask you a question. Do you have your copy before you?
I can reach it.
LB 157. And while he finds that, I'm going to continue speaking. My intent is to do everything I can to kill this bill. So I don't want there to be any doubts. I'm not talking about trying to make it better because it's a bad public policy. Senator Whiteman, would you turn to page 2 of the bill itself? And I'll wait. You don't have to rush. Okay. Would you find line 13 on page 2? Have you found that?
I have found it.
I'm going to read the language. Perform any act necessary in accordance with generally accepted standards of professional practice to protect, preserve, or aid the physical health or safety of the child during the temporary physical custody. What is the meaning of this term, generally accepted standards of professional practice? What is being referred to there?
If you're asking, could the bill be improved, I think it could.
That's not what I'm asking you. You're not sure what that language means, are you?
I think it would be better if they said the profession to which they belong.
But you're not sure from the language sitting there exactly what it's referring to.
I think it leaves a question.
Thank you. And your answer is what anybody would give who is being thoughtful. That's all I would ask you. There is not direction given. They're bragging about what a wonderful piece of legislation this is. The Judiciary Committee looked at it. Look at the 5 who supported it. Let them stand up here and tell you what these terms mean. Senator Lathrop spoke, but he didn't describe or explain anything in the bill itself. Others have hid it for cover. Senator Ashford speaking because he's chair of the committee and some questions were directed to him. It's clear that when you leave naked language such as this, standards of professional practice, that is not clear. And none of them wanted to tell you why the Hospital Association and the Medical Association opposed this bill. The supporters are going to get you up here and fill your head full of images of little babies just being rained into garbage dumps and all these other things they've talked about. And other than Senator Flood, I don't think a person can give you another example. Let me ask Senator Pauls a question if he would yield.
Senator Pauls, will you yield for a question?
Yes. Senator Pauls, how many examples of this, however you describe it, whether it's a child being dumped in a dumpster or whatever, how many of these instances in Nebraska have occurred that you know of?
I do not know because records haven't been kept, is my understanding.
So then people who are speculating about how widespread this is are doing exactly that, speculating. Is that true?
I do not think it would be widespread in the state of Nebraska because I'm thinking of population. If you may, let me refer to Florida. That was a significant number there.
Not Florida. Florida has one of the worst records on capital punishment of any state. They burn people alive, literally, and one of them was so bad, the Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court put it on the web so people could see this person in flames. So Florida won't get it. You answered my question. Thank you. He's not aware of any other incident in Nebraska. But the way these people are talking, you're going to get the idea that it's happening every day. You know what needs to be done, and if these people were sincere, they would do it. They would change society's attitude toward young women who get pregnant out of wedlock. That's what they would do, but they never do that. They don't care about these women. You never see things coming through this legislature that relate to the woman. When they talk about abortion and they're against it, they don't talk about the welfare of the woman, and it's always some man who brings it. Why is it that men have contrived more insulting words for women that go to their very personhood than exist for any other group? Tramp, slut, hoe, whore, bitch, trollop. These are names coined by men to degrade women. So why don't you all get busy? All of you people who I'll confess, based on what you say on this floor, are of a much more higher moral standard than I am. So why don't you, when in your moral superiority, change the attitude of this society toward these young girls and young women or older women who have babies out of wedlock, and stop attaching a stigma and expressing such contempt and hatred and scorn, and don't put them in a frame of mind where they feel if they tell anybody, then life, in effect, is over for them. Why don't you do that? Because it's easier to stand up here and bring a piece of poorly crafted legislation to address something that is not even a problem in Nebraska. We are a state legislature passing a statute, not just standing up here. It's not supposed to be that way, putting in the statute books our miscellaneous opinions.
1 minute.
You all don't even care the language that's used to express this. Language is in it which nobody understands what it means. And when people who are rational can have different conclusions as to what language means, then you can conclude that the language is ambiguous, that it's vague, that it's unclear. And there is liability that can attach to these firefighters and to these hospital workers, as should be the case. I think it may have been Senator Lathrop, and if I'm mistaken, he can correct me. He said something about the fire station must be occupied. If a desperate person comes, you think they're going to wait to see if it's occupied? They've been told you can drop the child at a fire station. They drive up, drop the child, and they're gone. That's where they put things in these statutes that are not going to apply in the real world. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. Mr. President, members of the legislature, I like my chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Senator Brad Ashford. But what Senator Ashford did was skeeted and skimmed like a water bug over the surface of a pond. Here's what he said, words to this effect. Senator Chambers mentioned generally accepted standards of professional practice. I think that's the appropriate standard. But he didn't tell you what that standard is, did he? He said it's the appropriate, but he didn't tell you. Then he skimmed across the issue raised by Senator Fulton by saying that, well, yeah, that section and that which follows, but it doesn't say this section and that which follows. He said it tells how to deal with juveniles. What Senator Fulton was pointing out is that it does not relate to these infants. But Senator Ashford really didn't go into detail on that, but what he did say several times, we're willing to work with people to make the bill better. We'll work with people, we'll do something about this language. But he knows, now that we've had this discussion, that this language is not acceptable. This is not suitable to go into the statutes as a law. But maybe you should put it there anyway because it's not going to make any difference. When we talk about where a person can leave these infants, I want to ask Senator Stoutman will have his own time, so I won't ask him, and he can maybe address it. If the person is required to deliver the child to a firefighter or a hospital staff member, that contradicts all this mess that we've heard. You know what the supporters of this bill have said? You've got a young woman here who does not want people to know that she had a baby, does not want to contact or be seen in connection with that. Yet she has to deliver the child under this law to a firefighter, to a hospital staff member. Well, suppose the information comes out that you can leave these babies at the firehouse or the hospital. Then the woman goes and leaves the child outside the hospital or outside the fire station. I'm talking about deal with reality and the life and the circumstances that people are going to find themselves in if we're really discussing actual people and trying to get a notion of how this will play out. Suppose the person feels that every one of these establishments, in fact, might have a video camera. Then that's the place not to go because you're going to be caught on tape when you do it. All the people who are supporting this bill talk about how great the concept is, but they can't deal with any of the practical real aspects of it, and I'm being specific. I'm raising specific problems with the bill. And when I ask, what does this language about the accepted professional standards mean, we're told that that's the appropriate standard, but we're not told what it means. Who in here knows what it means? You'll give your opinion. I'll give my opinion. Somebody else gives his or her opinion. What is the authoritative meaning? Why don't they define it in the statute? They were what we were told. They thought about this. Rather than leave ambiguous language when you get right to the crux of how this operates, why not give definitions so everybody knows? And it doesn't matter whether I'd still be opposed to the bill or not. You are legislating. And if people ask you what this language means and you don't know, who is supposed to know? Senator?
1 minute.
Already. Senator Friend had said maybe the bracket motion is not appropriate at this time, but we'll be on this other days, and I'll offer it on another day. And I'm going to also offer to refer this bill back to the Judiciary Committee, since the chairman has all but acknowledged that there's additional work that needs to be done, and they're willing to do it and work with whoever is willing, but we shouldn't run it on to select file. Send it back to the committee. But you probably don't want to do that either. However, you are having all those who support the bill acknowledge that there are problems with it. There are changes that ought to be made. There are changes that can be made. Let them tell us what those changes are. Thank you, Mr. President.
President, I yield my time to Senator Chambers.
Senator Chambers, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator White. Members of the legislature, I will stay on an issue like this as long as is necessary, because what I'm talking about goes beyond this bill. It goes to the nature of the work that we're doing, the pride we ought to take in the work that we're doing. In past years, before I was under the axeman's axe, which is on its way down to sever my head from my neck, because I may only have a year left after this, I would take time on this floor and rewrite bills of other senators. Some of those who've been here have seen where I will have a list of amendments that might number 30. Not to kill the bill, to correct it, to rewrite it. I've taken my time on weekends to take some of this bad legislation that I was opposed to, go home and rewrite it. That's not my job, but I assumed it. But I'm not going to keep doing it when we have this kind of stuff coming out here. If it was my bill and people raise legitimate issues of this kind, I would say what I think I'm going to do, since I was not as attentive as I needed to be, is move from this bill and work it, or I would be offering amendments to correct it. But I wouldn't just be standing on the floor, temporizing, alibiing, offering excuses, and doing nothing to improve it. I don't believe the committee amendments even touch the issues that I'm raising now, because I read the committee amendments. I'm not talking about the immunity granted in the green copy, because the committee amendments did away with the immunity. So that means that firefighters are held to this professional standard. Now, if you're going to hold a firefighter to the standards of professional practice, and they fail to meet those standards, no matter how well-intentioned they are liable. But they don't know what those standards are. Nobody knows. And if they look at the legislative history, they're not going to find where anybody stood on this floor who supports this bill and explained to these firefighters and others what those standards of professional practice are. Since you put the word practice, are you talking about medical practice? Senator Ashford hasn't told us how he would overcome the objection of the Medical Association, the Hospital Association. He did point out that the hospitals will receive infants under these circumstances now. Why then would they be opposed to the bill? Why would they be opposed to the bill? There is a great deal of discussion that needs to take place on this bill, and there will be a great deal of discussion if it is only engaged in by me. You will see, my new brothers and sisters, that I don't need a lot of senators talking in order for me to deal with something like this. I will do it alone. There's enough wrong with this bill to keep us here until doomsday, whenever that is, or later. But if my bracket motion, if we get a vote on it today and it does not go, then I'm going to start working on the committee amendments.
1 minute.
And then, if you get to a point where you can vote on the committee amendments, but maybe you won't, then I'm going to start working on the green copy of the bill itself. And we're going to stay on this, and stay on this, and stay on this. Y'all didn't mind talking forever on the smoking bill, did you? That didn't bother you? So we're going to talk on this bill that I'm interested in and concerned about. And I say again, Senator Ashford, I don't need any help. You can turn your light off. But if you want to join in the discussion, I assure you I'm going to listen very carefully to what you say, take it under advisement, and respond to it if a response is appropriate. I'm not going to understate the significance of what anybody says, and I will respond to whatever is said that I think merits it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Chambers has been on the Judiciary Committee for 37 years, and I learned a great deal from him. And I know he was there when we weren't you? Senator Chambers, can I ask you a question?
Senator Chambers, would you yield to a
what I
question?
may be doing is just asking a lot of questions. I have nothing particular to say, so I'm going to ask you a question. You were there when we went over this bill, weren't you?
And I was strongly opposed to it every step of the way. Yes, I was there.
You were opposed, but you always, in my experience, you're a legislator before anything else, and your comments are great. This is a good exercise in legislating. So let's legislate. What should we do, in your opinion, after all these years? What should we do what standard should we use? And let's just talk language. What language should we use to make this work? I don't know what else you
Senator Ashford, I don't believe in alchemy. I don't believe in magic. I don't believe in miracles. I cannot bring a clean thing out of an unclean thing, nor convert a sow's ear into a silk purse. We ought to kill the bill. If you ask for my opinion, that's what we ought to do.
But there is no language. In all those years of experience, there's no language that you can think of other than professional standards of conduct.
I didn't put that in the bill.
I know, but I don't know what other words you use.
Well, it's up to you and those who support the bill to say what you mean by those terms. What I've suggested, Senator Ashford, is that the term is ambiguous. Nobody on the floor can say with certitude what that term means. So I had suggested that the way you get rid of ambiguity when you're legislating is to define the term to remove the ambiguity.
Let's do that. If we define that term, then we've got it. There is no more ambiguity, and then what we're really talking about is policy issues, our policy issues, not wording issues.
And of course, it would depend on what the definition of the term would be.
But arguably, if we could come up with a definition, we could move on.
I don't think you can on this bill.
If we come up with if we find a definition for professional standards, then we can move on.
Well, not necessarily. What would the definition be? That's what I'm continuing.
Well, I'll find one. I mean, we've only got 10 minutes, so I don't think I'll have one between now and 12 o'clock. But if we find a definition, we can move on and vote on this bill and move it to a select file.
You hope.